And today we're just going to talk about the life of Imam Ahmad, because if we're going to study, the madhab that was based upon his teachings, it's beneficial, inshallah, to at least learn some aspect of his life. So Imam Ahmad's full name is Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Hanbal al-Shaybani. Ahmad, the son of Muhammad, the son of Hanbal, the son of al-Shaybani. And al-Shaybani was one of the great Arab tribes. Ibn Athir, rahimahullah ta'ala, he was one of the historians, Muslim historians. He says that Banu Shayban min butun qabilat al-Arab min Bakr. And he says that ليس في العرب أعز دارا ولا أمنع جارا ولا أكثر حريفا من بني شيبان, or أكثر خلقا من بني شيبان, another narration, that the Banu Shayban are the most honorable of the Arab, and there is nobody from the tribes more honorable in that sense, and they are most loyal to their neighbors, meaning that they will protect anybody who comes to them for protection. They'll protect them, and they were one of the biggest of tribes in numbers. And even though Imam Ahmad was from this tribe, it never was reported that he bragged about it or talked about it. Even though he had a right to, he was saying from honorable lineage, but he didn't get into these affairs. And one of his students actually asked him, you're from Banu Shayban, mashallah, you're from this great tribe, why don't you ever mention? And he says, كلنا فقراء إلى الله, that we're all poor to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're all poor, basically masakeen, right? It's not going to help, your lineage is not going to help you on the day of judgment if you're not a righteous person. So that was one of the honorable things about him. He was a leader in fiqh and hadith and in creed. And he also took a stance, which we'll talk about his story inshallah, for his community that was held a very large place in Islam for all the generations to follow. Ali ibn Madini, rahimahullah ta'ala, he said that Islam was preserved on 2 occasions, with Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu in the Ridda, and with Imam Ahmad during the Mihna. So during the time of Abu Bakr, when he was the Khalifa, some people tried to renege or go against the principles of Islam and leave and fight against the Muslims. So Abu Bakr took a firm stance against them and enforced the principles of Islam and brought them back basically through his efforts. And then Imam Ahmad during the Mihna, this was a trial for the Muslim creed. And Imam Ahmad took a stance that, alhamdulillah, through his efforts, the correct creed was preserved and this deviant creed was, basically dismissed. Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, he says that Ishaq, all these people I'm mentioning are like mountains of scholars, mashallah. If you study their biographies, you'll be amazed. And these mountains are speaking about Imam Ahmad. So Ishaq ibn Rahawayh, he was actually the teacher of Imam Bukhari. And he says that Imam Ahmad is hujjah bain Allahi wa ibadati. That Imam Ahmad is a proof or hujjah between Allah and his servants. And if it was not for Imam Ahmad and what he sacrificed of himself for Islam, Islam as we know it would not be here today. Imam al-Muzani, who was one of the top students of Imam al-Shafi'i, also one of the greatest of scholars, he says that from the Khulafa, there was 4 men who shined. He mentioned the Khulafa al-Rashidin, right? He said Abu Bakr on the day of Ridda, what we discussed, and Umar radiallahu on the day of Saqif, and Uthman when he was besieged, and Ali on the day of Siffin. And he mentioned with these 4 of the Khulafa Rashidin, Imam Ahmad on the day or the time of the Mihna, putting him up there with the 4 righteous Khulafa. And he says that anybody who loves Imam Ahmad loves the Sunnah, and anybody who hates Imam Ahmad hates the Sunnah. So he was originally, rahimahullah ta'ala, from Baghdad, Iraq. His grandfather, Hanbal, was the governor of Sarkhas during the Umayyad period. And that's why he's known as usually sometimes the person is referred to one of the most famous people in his family. So that's why we say he's Ahmad ibn Hanbal, even though his father was named Muhammad. But because Hanbal was one of the great or well-known governors at the time, Imam Ahmad was referred to him. So he's Ahmad ibn Hanbal, even though it should be Ahmad ibn Muhammad. His father was also Some say a general, some say a colonel, some say a soldier in the Abbasid army in Khurasan. And like I said, he came from a noble tribe. He was descended from the pure Arab lineage, and he actually connected with the Prophet ﷺ from Banu Nazir ibn Ma'ad from Aden, the clan of Banu Bakr. So there was like some relation actually between the tribe of Shayban and the Prophet ﷺ. His mother, Safiya bint Maymun bint Abdul Malik, was also from the tribe of Shayban, and she was a noble woman. And Imam Ahmad loved her very much because his father passed away when he was a child, so he got raised by his mother, and he was very close to his mother. And it was reported that she would when she would wash his clothes and allow them to dry and stuff, she would put little notes of encouragement for him, positive speaking for her son. And she would make sure to take him to all of the halaqas that she could so he can seek knowledge. He lived in the capital of Iraq at that time, Baghdad, so it was like the center of the Muslim world. And he basically spent most of his youth, he memorized the Quran, I think at the age of 10 or 11, with the help of his mother. Even though he was an orphan, his mom made sure that he would attend all the most important classes that he could. And he learned also to be self-reliant. His mom would make ends meet to make them survive, and wouldn't ask of anybody anything. So he learned this from a young age, to be dependent upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His mother also, she loved Imam Ahmad so much, and she saw in him something very special, and that's why she devoted so much time to him, so that she really wanted him to be a scholar when he grew up. So she would take him to all the different masajid to take him to the best teachers, make sure that he would memorize the Quran, that he would learn the best manners, that he would be somebody that was respected in the community. And during the time, his time, and even up until modern times, they used to hire, the families of wealth would hire what's called a mu'addab, right? Somebody that would teach your child adab, good manners, good akhlaq, good character. And all of them were wondering, because Imam Ahmad had the highest character, who his mu'addab was. But of course, subhanAllah, they couldn't afford a mu'addab. It was his mother's teachings and upbringing that led him to be, from the most well-mannered of the children and the youth. Yes. Yes. Muhammad ibn Hassan al-Shaybani, yes, same tribe. They did overlap. We'll talk about inshallah when his journeys, subhanAllah. Also, subhanAllah, because of his birr or righteousness towards his mother, he didn't get married until the age of 40. Even though before that, so many people would try to offer him their daughters because of his good adab and his ilm and his akhlaq. He refused because he wanted to focus on seeking knowledge and taking care of his mother. As she took care of him so much, he didn't want to leave her and get married, and maybe his wife would mistreat her or something like that. So he just wanted to be, on the safe side, to not mistreat her, but maybe he won't treat his wife correctly because he's so focused on taking care of his mother. This is not the sunnah. Of course, it's sunnah to get married young, but there are certain ulama that subhanAllah forsake, marriage for the sake of Islam or for the sake of some of their duties. Some of the great scholars like Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam al-Nawawi, Imam Ahmad until later times. I know one of my teachers, I don't know if he ever did marry, but Sheikh Muhammad Mukhtar Shanqiti, he used in Medina, one of the great scholars of our time, mashallah. He up until, I think he was in at least his 40s or 50s, he still hadn't gotten married at that time. And some say because also he was taking care of his mother, subhanAllah. But anyways, after his mother passed, he married Abasa bint Fadl, and she was kind of a scholar in of herself. And they said when they got married, she actually gave him a khutbah, and he was amazed, right? And he gave, he had to come up with a response to look okay himself. So he also answered her, and with a nice khutbah as well. And he loved her so much, and she was, such a great companion to him. He didn't marry on her. Usually at that time, men would marry more than one wife in general. So he stayed with her without marrying another wife because of this. And even was asked, why don't you marry somebody else? He says Salih, she's the mother of his first child, Salih. We never argued in 30 years I've been with her, except one time, and she was right. SubhanAllah. But after she passed away, he married Rayhana, and that's the mother of Abdullah. So you know that Salih and Abdullah are like two of the scholars of Islam, the sons of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala. And she also had passed away, and he married Al-Husayn, and she had with him Zainab, the daughter, and Hassan and Hussein, the twins. They passed away, subhanAllah, but then she had more sons afterwards, Al-Hassan, Muhammad, and Sa'id. Sa'id, his last son, was born like 50 days before he passed away, subhanAllah. So up until old age, he was having children. Salih and Abdullah, they became scholars of hadith, and Sa'id actually became the head judge of Kufa, to show his righteous offspring, subhanAllah. He started seriously dedicating himself to the study of hadith at the age of 15 approximately. So he memorized the Quran, he was learning the adab, getting the local scholars, and then he went to go and seek the knowledge of hadith. And he went to Hushaym ibn Bashir, who was the teacher of Imam Malik. And not only Imam Malik, he taught Imam Malik, Imam al-Sha'bi, Imam Abu Hanifa, and Imam al-Thawri. So this sheikh was very old in age, but look at the scholars that he taught. And Hushaym wasn't very popular, like some of the other scholars at the time, but he was known for his piety and knowledge. And Imam Ahmad didn't care too much about popularity. Like, he cared what would benefit him the most. So he spent 4 years with this Imam and learned from him over 3,000 hadith until the Imam passed away. And he respected him so much, in his old age. He had like very high, what's called like haiba, which is something like awe-inspiring. This sheikh was like awe-inspiring to Imam Ahmad, and he was very shy from him, but he loved him so much and stood and benefited from him. Then he went to Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf, who was a student of who? Abu Hanifa. So close to Muhammad Shaybani, but I don't know if he studied with him or not, but he did definitely study with Al-Qadi Abu Yusuf. And that's why you'll find also in the fiqh of the Hanabila, there is some overlapping between Hanafi fiqh and Hanbali fiqh in mu'amalat, in the chapters of like business and transactions. Then he went to Basra, Medina, Mecca. He made Hajj 5 times. 3 times he did it walking. Most of his journeys, they said, was walking because he didn't have much wealth. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, the Shaykh of Sufyan al-Thawri, he is one of the great scholars of hadith. Imam Ahmad met with him and studied with him together, and they exchanged ahadith. And Ishaq ibn Rahaway and this Shaykh, they would sit together and review with Imam Ahmad. And one time he came late, which was not his norm, obviously, so they were wondering what's going on. And he said, come with me, I found something spectacular, basically. And this was the halaqah of Imam al-Shafi'i, subhanAllah. So one of the other great imams of the 4 madhab, Imam al-Shafi'i. And he was younger at that time. Imam al-Shafi'i was young. And so the scholars were like, why are we going to leave our elders to go and sit with this young one? And he said, subhanAllah, perhaps I might miss some of the high chains of narrations, because when you have like less narrators between you and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it's like considered a nice chain of narration. He said, but I can find the chains elsewhere, but I don't think I'll find somebody with the aql of this young man, Imam Shafi'i, And so he went and he kind of fell in love with Imam Shafi'i's teachings and became his student as well and attended his narrations. One of the beautiful hadith actually he narrated from Imam Shafi'i has all the major imams in it. So the hadith is from Ahmad to his teacher Imam Shafi'i, to his teacher Imam Malik, from Imam Ibn Shihab Zuhri, from Abdurrahman ibn Ka'ab, from Ka'ab ibn Malik, from the Prophet ﷺ. And the hadith is إِنَّمَا نَسْمَةُ الْمُؤْمِنِ طَائِرٌ تَعَلُّقُ فِي شَجَرٍ, that the soul of the believers are in the birds in the trees in Jannah, right? So it's a beautiful hadith because this narration of the great imams that learn from one another. You see in general, subhanAllah, how Allah preserved the knowledge through, there's always overlapping from these righteous people, from the Sahaba radiallahu anhu down to these imams, down to our time. Also, Imam Ahmad said that one of his most prized students was Imam Ahmad. And when he left Baghdad, he said, I didn't leave anybody more pious and more knowledgeable than Imam Ahmad. And he said that Imam Ahmad was like the cream of the crop in 8 major areas. He said he's an Imam in Hadith, he's an Imam in Fiqh, he's an Imam in Lugha, language. And Imam Shafi was one of the great scholars of language, obviously. He was the Imam in the Quran, he was the Imam in poverty, faqr, learning to live with like little. He was the Imam in Zuhd, like piety, and he was the Imam in wara, abstaining, from doubtful matters. And he was the Imam in the Sunnah. SubhanAllah, this is Imam Shafi talking about Imam Ahmad. And he told Imam Ahmad when he was leaving, if you ever find a hadith that we don't know about, please teach it to us or tell us about it so that we can act upon it. Which is giving him kind of like putting him in a position of a teacher from his own teacher. There's a funny story about Imam Shafi rahimahullah spending the night with Imam Ahmad. Imam Ahmad obviously was in love with his teacher and like talked him up to his family all the time and said this is a great Imam and etc. So finally he was going to be a guest with him at his house and his family was very excited, right? So Imam Shafi'i came and it wasn't too spectacular for the family, you can say. So his daughter, she was she was a faqih herself and very observant, and she was watching from afar what's going on with this great Imam that's coming to us. And she noticed that he didn't pray Qiyam al-Layl, and he didn't make wudu for Fajr, and he apparently ate too much while he was there. And she complained to her father, and he's like, Esh hadha al-Imam, la qiyam, wala, he's not praying the Qiyam al-Layl, he's not fasting, he's just eating, and he didn't even make wudu for Salat al-Fajr. And so Imam Ahmad, he was shy, he knew there's something, so he went to ask Imam Ahmad, I'm sorry to disturb you, but it was said such and such and such and such. And he said, SubhanAllah, after Isha, I started thinking about a fiqh issue, and I was going back and forth with it the whole night until the adhan of Fajr came, and then I finally figured out the answer, and I kept my wudu, so I just went and prayed the Fajr. And then he said, oh, what about the food? And he said, because I only like to eat from the halal, and I know that you struggle so much to only earn from the halal, so I felt comfortable eating from your house, and I wanted to replenish myself before my journey, basically in eating halal. So subhanAllah, even there's an answer for all those suspicions. On another story, I'm just mentioning, trying to summarize, because some biographies are 700 pages about Imam Ahmad. There's a lot of well-known facts about him, and students wrote a lot about him, so I'm just trying to mention some of the stories. He used to, like I said, walk for the Hajj sometimes, and sometimes he'd only have a little bit of money to get him there, and sometimes he'd have to make his money carrying the luggage of the people so he can go to the Hajj. One particular one, he wanted to meet Abdul Razak al-San'ani, who was a great muhaddith, and so the only way he could do it was helping people carry their luggage so he can make some money to take him to the Hajj and live there, obviously, and get his sustenance, etc. And he wanted to ask permission for the Shaykh to go and study with him, right? So he used the intermediary Yahya ibn Mu'in, who was another great scholar, to go and seek permission. And Yahya ibn Mu'in, he said, he went to Imam Abdul Razak al-San'ani to ask permission for Imam Ahmad, and Abdul Razak said, of course, he can sit with me. Even Imam Ahmad is known as a scholar himself. He said, of course, he can come sit. And so Imam Yahya went to Imam Ahmad and said, I have good news, the Shaykh accepted for you to go and sit with him. He said, he was upset. He's I said I wanted to go to see him in his home in Yemen, right? I don't want to disrespect the Shaykh, and knowledge is supposed to be sought out. It doesn't come to me, right? I don't want to ruin my niyyah, my intention with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he actually let the Shaykh go back to Yemen, and he followed him to Yemen, walking or however way he can get to Yemen, so he can go and seek his knowledge in the comfort of his own home, in his own city, basically, out of respect to the Shaykh. When he went to Yemen and sought him out, Abdul Razak was amazed, that this person would come, all this way, and he could have just gotten the hadith in Mecca or something like that, but out of respect for the knowledge and his, keenness on, respect for the scholars, he came all the way there, and Imam Abdul Razak actually hugged him, and rugged him. And Imam Ahmad, he didn't eat for 3 days while he was there because he was so keen on taking the hadith. And you can imagine, subhanAllah, how much knowledge he loved to seek. And anytime Imam Ahmad was mentioned in front of Abdul Razak, tears would come to his eyes because he remembered that instance of what he did. Imam Ahmad studied with over 400 scholars, and there's many like beautiful stories in his journeys. One story also, it was said that he was traveling in Syria at the time, and he wanted to sleep in the masjid because he didn't have much money, obviously, or any places to stay. But the guard, when Isha was finished, he had to close the masjid, and he told Imam Ahmad, "You have to leave," right? And Imam Ahmad was like, I'm a traveler, can I just sleep? And he said, no, that's the rules of the city, we have to close. And he forced Imam Ahmad out, dragged him out basically. And there was a baker across the street that was watching this, commotion going on. And he saw that the sheikh was like being kind of disrespected or mistreated. So he went to him and said, like, you can come stay with me. I have a place for you, inshallah. And he went, to go stay with this baker. And he noticed that this baker is always like, when he's not talking to him or anything else, he was always doing tasbih and tahmeed, and tahleel, like saying subhanallah, alhamdulillah, la ilaha illallah, Allahu akbar, continuously, all the time. Like every time he would look at him, he's doing this tasbih, like dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Ahmad was, approached him. He said, subhanallah, since I've been here, I've seen you always, doing this dhikr, like non-stop, mashallah. Have you received any bounties or blessings from this? And he says, yes, any dua I make to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, He answers my dua. Except one thing I'm still waiting for, and that is to meet the great Imam Ahmad. And then he said, I'm Imam Ahmad. Allah dragged me from the masjid to you with your, subhanallah, gift of making the dhikr. And so this is like the fruits of making dhikr and the blessings that Imam Ahmad was known like far and wide of being a pious person and a scholar. Imam Ahmad is attributed to him that he memorized 1,000,000 hadith. When we say 1,000,000 hadith, it doesn't mean that it's actually 1,000,000 hadith. It means that it's like the different narrations. So even if a word changes in the hadith, it's considered a different hadith. Even if one narrator changes, it's considered a different hadith. So basically, he memorized all the different chains of different narrations of the Prophet ﷺ, and it added up to that amount. But you can imagine the mind he must have had to contain so much. Subhanallah. His halaqas before his trial, which we're going to talk about, was attended by like 5,000 people, and after the trial, it went up to like 50,000 people. They didn't have microphones then, obviously, but they would have someone who acted like a human microphone. So it would be like, as far as the voices could be heard, and then that person, he would narrate what he heard, and then would keep going all the way till it reached the whole crowd, subhanAllah. Imam Ahmad, he only wanted, in general, to transmit hadith. He was very keen to not use his opinion as much as possible. And even if the hadith was weak, he preferred that it was weak and not in contradiction to the Quran and Sunnah, he preferred that over his own opinion. He loved the poor, and he would always invite them to his halaqas. Like he would always give preference and deference to the fuqara and the masakin, right? And treat them with dignity and respect. And because the Prophet ﷺ loved them as well, so he would follow the sunnah. And he tried not to because at the time like the elites were like kind of neglecting the poor. It would be like just the rich people having their parties or having their weddings or having like that. Imam Ahmad would always try to bring the poor with him wherever he went, in any events or any weddings or anything like that, to get rid of this jahili thing of that, like the rich can only be by themselves, or and the poor should be neglected. He would finish the Quran in some narrations like on a daily basis, or at least often, and he used to pray 300 rak'ats per night. Subhanallah. After the mihna, because he was beaten so bad, he would pray 150 a night. But even subhanallah, how many of us can pray that much? 150, in his old age, he's praying that much. He would have like a dua list, subhanallah, because people would ask him to make dua, and he wanted to be, sincere. So he'd actually write down their names and their requests so he won't forget them. And he had certain people that he would always make dua for. His parents, for example, and some of his teachers like Imam Shafi and others, he would always make dua. And it was known for him that, subhanAllah, he was mustajab dua, like Allah would answer his prayers. But he didn't want it to be spread like that. So one time his mother became paralyzed, and he went to Imam Ahmad, asked him to make dua for her, that Allah would cure her. Imam Ahmad said you should make dua for her and she should make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he didn't want to be like the one, responsible. So the man felt a little bit bad that he was turned away, but he went and followed the advice, and he came back later and he said that my mom is cured, alhamdulillah. And the student said that Imam Ahmad did make dua for her, but he just didn't want it to be like, known, or people to think that his dua is always accepted. So he made the person think that his dua was, that was accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ishaq ibn Rahawayh rahimahullah ta'ala, he says about Imam Ahmad, if it wasn't for him, basically wara, the knowledge of like being careful of halal and worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and being pious, the knowledge would have disappeared. So Imam Ahmad like preserved it in his actions, subhanAllah. And he never, held grudges. It was reported that one person backbited him, talked badly about him, and he forgave him. But he said, except I will forgive you if you don't do it again, right? Because he didn't want him to fall into sin, subhanAllah. That's how he was. He didn't really care about himself so much, but he just didn't want that person to get punished for sin. That's the beauty of Imam Ahmad. The mihna, this is like the important part of Imam Ahmad's life, and for the sunnah that was preserved through his efforts, subhanAllah. The mihna means the trial, the tribulation. There was a Khalifa at the time of the Abbasid dynasty, Al-Ma'mun, and he started to take the creed, from Ja'd ibn Darham, and later was Jaham ibn Safwan. They had this weird ideology that the Quran was created, and like some weird philosophies and stuff like that. But they influenced the Khalifa, or these thoughts influenced the Khalifa, and he was the first one to like deviate and try to force the people to follow this weird religion. He put out like an edict basically that it should be written on the masajid, these deviant ideologies, and anybody who disagrees it should be executed. So subhanAllah, he came under the influence of another Ahmad ibn Du'ad. He was like one of the main propagators of this philosophy at the time, of the Mu'tazila and these types of beliefs. And he made him like a judge basically. So he gave influence in the court. And they went forth and they said to go through all the different scholars and give them the test. If they agree with this, let them go. If they disagree with this, they should be executed. So subhanAllah, from about 1,000 scholars, all of them agreed. They didn't believe in it, but they wanted to save their lives. And it's permissible in Islam sometimes if you feel fear for your life, you can say something that you don't really believe in, right? So they took that permission, except for two, Ahmad ibn Hanbal and Abu Maryam Muhammad ibn Nuh. Those are the only two scholars that didn't refuse to say that statement. And subhanAllah, they were punished tremendously for holding on to the correct aqidah. They were tortured. Imam Muhammad ibn Nuh actually died on his way to being tortured, subhanAllah. And Imam Ahmad remained. Imam Ahmad received a letter from Imam al-Shafi, rahimahullah ta'ala. He said that he prayed the Fajr, and a person came in and gave him the letter, and he asked him, did you read it? And he said, no. And so Imam Ahmad opened the letter up, and he read it, and then his face started to change, and he started to cry. And then the student, Rabia, asked, oh, Abu Abdullah, oh, Father Abdullah, why are you crying? What's wrong? He said that Imam Shafi'i, he said, I saw the Prophet in a dream. And he said, give my salam to Abi Abdullah, Imam Ahmad, and write to him that you're going to be severely tested and tried and asked to say that the Quran is created. Don't succumb to their fitna, and you will have a flag raised for you on the Day of Judgment. And so he goes, return my salam to Imam Shafi'i, and may the salat wa salam be upon our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and tell Imam Shafi'i, I will not give in, but please don't forget me in your dua. So in Ma'mun, he sent the guards to Imam Ahmad and took him, to ask if the Quran was created or the speech of Allah is created, and he said, no, it's not. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's speech, not created. And he said, aren't you afraid what Ma'mun's going to do to you? He's waiting for his sword to kill you, basically. He says, I'm more afraid of what Allah will do with me. And so they put him in chains and tied his like hands with chains behind his head and shackled his feet, and they were abusing him, insulting him, spitting on him, a'udhu billah. And while he was walking, that's when he saw that Muhammad ibn Nuh had passed away. He was also being brought forth to the Khalifa to be tested or tried, and he died before he got there, subhanAllah. As he was going, this happens to the believer sometimes, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sends you messages from places you don't expect. So a Bedouin, he came to Imam Ahmad while he was being taken there, and he said to him, we're all going to die one day, right? So stay firm upon what you believe in and die for something. Don't die for just like a normal death, but die for something you believe in. And so the guards, they took him to the Ma'mun, who was waiting with his sword, and they said that no, as they were taking him to Ma'mun, they told him, like, if you don't say it, just say it, like it's just some words, like even if you don't believe it, just say it, he'll leave you alone. He says, I can't say it. But they said, he's going to kill you, like as soon as you get there, he's going to execute you. And he started making dua that Allah doesn't let him see Ma'mun. And subhanAllah, that night Ma'mun died before he was able to see Imam Ahmad. But it didn't, unfortunately, his predecessor, Al-Mu'tasim, followed him in the same policy. And the problem is, Al-Mu'tasim was even more like ignorant. He didn't care about the philosophy or anything like that, but he was a brutal person. Like he enjoyed like torture and like, being a dictator type thing. So he was asked, what are you going to do with Imam Ahmad now that Al-Mu'tasim was passed away? He said, let him rot in jail for a couple of years before I talk to him. And so they put him in prison, and to make his conditions very miserable. And they had like his family or friends or other scholars come to him and try to get him to like recant or just say it so he can get out of prison. He refused. Even his uncle Ishaq came to him and he said, like, you're being tortured, it's too much, like just, everybody knows you don't believe in it, just say it. So he says, he took him to the window and he said, look at, there's a crowd outside waiting for him. He said, what will I tell these people on the Day of Judgment? They're all waiting for a statement from Imam Ahmad, right? Why should I sell my religion just to save myself? And what will I say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the Day of Judgment for all these people who are waiting for my word? He said, his uncle also tried to convince him. He said that your companion Yahya bin Mu'in, he even said it, like he took the permission to say it. And Imam Ahmad was like very sad about that, and he never talked to him after that, subhanAllah. He was asked about him for hadith. He said, yes, take hadith from him, he is a great scholar. But just personally, like, he was very upset because this knowledgeable scholar should not have, fallen to even though it's permissible, he should have held to a higher standard. And that's why Imam Ahmad took that position, because who else from Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah was going to do that? If he didn't do it, then khalas, it would have been spread all over the Muslim Ummah, right? And people would believe today a false ideology. But Imam Ahmad saw this and he took, held firm to his belief and his principles. And they were, like the son came to visit him barefoot one day, and he was asking, where are your shoes? He said, we can't afford it anymore. All these things are like trying to break him down, but he remained strong, alhamdulillah. And after 3 years, he was brought to the Khalifa to, be tried, basically. And he pulled him by the beard in like a harsh manner, and he said, say this. And he said, give me a proof from the book of Allah or the Sunnah of the Prophet that it's okay, and I will say it. And they argued, and he brought Abu Duad, and Imam Ahmad basically embarrassed him with proofs and evidences, and they became, infuriated, and they ordered for him to start getting flogged and hit and beat. A drunkard came to him, and he said, you're going to get, I got lashed because I love alcohol. You're getting lashed because you love Allah. You can stand firm. And another, subhanAllah, like a person that was considered like a fornicator, he said, like, don't worry, after 5 lashes, you won't feel it that much anymore. Like all these little comforts coming to Imam Ahmad, subhanAllah. But they tortured him more than any other prisoner at the time, beating him so much that like the skin started coming off of his back. And one of the doctors at the time said that if they had beaten an elephant like they beat Imam Ahmad, the elephant would have died. And what Imam Ahmad was he worried about? He was making dua to Allah that his awrah was not exposed, like his private areas weren't exposed during the beating, And this guard said that like as much as they tried, they could not get his pants, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like protecting him. And he had a shirt too that he had like a hair of the Prophet ﷺ, they say, sewed into it, which also was not able to be torn, subhanAllah. But they beat him, to the point of unconsciousness over and over and over again. In some narration, they said they had like 150 different men, guards, each one doing 2 lashes, so they're fresh each time they come, a new person that's fresh and strong to beat the Imam, rahimahullah ta'ala. And then, his concern, subhanAllah, things like the ibadah, worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Jummah, every Jummah, he would go to the guard and say, let me go to Jummah. And the guard, said, I can't let you out of the prison. And he would, be crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, oh Allah, I want to go to Jummah, they're preventing me. One time he was beaten so bad during Ramadan, they feared for him, so they brought him some food. And he said, it's not time to break the fast yet. He woke up out of unconsciousness, sick, beaten, bloody. And he has permission to break the fast, because of the sickness. He refused because it was not time for breaking the fast. He used to say like, Allah have mercy on Abu Hanifa. He remembered Abu Hanifa. All the great Imams, subhanAllah, went through their trials and tribulations at the hands of like corrupt authorities sometime. Imam Abu Hanifa was also beaten, and he actually died in prison as well, subhanAllah. So he remembered, Abu Hanifa, and he made dua for him for that. And then the time when Mu'tasim was thinking like, of what to do in terms of execution or not, he saw a dream, and this angels brought him in the dream to the cell of Imam Ahmad. And they asked Imam Ahmad, the angels, what do you say about the Quran? And he says, Kalamullahi ghayru makhluq. It is the words of Allah, it is not created. And he said, where did you hear this from? He said, from Abdul Razak al-Sanani, remember the teacher. And then the angels go to Abdul Razak and he asks him the same question. This is all in the dream of the Khalifa at that time. And Abdul Razak says, I heard it from Ma'mar, his teacher. And they go to him and they say the same thing. He says, the words of Allah, ghayr makhluq. He said, where did you hear this from? He said, from a Zuhri. Then they go to Zuhri and they ask him the same thing in the dream. He says the same answer. And he said, where did you hear it from? He said, from Urwa ibn Zubayr. And then he goes to Urwa ibn Zubayr and asks the same question. He says, Kalamullahi ghayr makhluq. Where did you hear this from? He said, from Aisha radiallahu anha. And they go to Aisha and they ask the same thing. And then she says, from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he goes to the Prophet ﷺ and he says the same thing. And he said, where did you hear it from? He said, from Jibreel. Then he goes to Jibreel ﷺ and he goes, where did you hear this from? He said, from Lawh al-Mahfuz, the special book. Then he goes to the Lawh al-Mahfuz and the book and says, I got it from the Qalam. Then he goes to the Qalam, the pen, and said, who did you get this from? And he said, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? And so when he saw this dream, this is the Khalifa that was going to kill Imam Ahmad. Before he was going to execute him, yes, he saw that dream, and then he let Imam Ahmad out of the prison, and he died actually. But the next Khalifa also, subhanAllah, went back on the same type of deviancy, and they tried to kill Imam Ahmad, but Imam Ahmad was in hiding at that time. And right before they were about to capture him, that Khalifa died as well, al-Wathiq, basically. And then it became al-Mutawakkil ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He became a righteous Khalifa, and he actually told Imam Ahmad to come out of hiding, and he honored Imam Ahmad. He wanted to give him money, and Imam Ahmad refused. He wanted to give him a position of authority. Imam Ahmad refused. He doesn't want anything to this. He said, subhanAllah, this trial is more dangerous for me than the trial I just came from. He didn't want the dunya. His son actually took money from the Khalifa, because the Khalifa wanted to give him something as gifts. So his sons took some money, and Imam Ahmad was very mad, and he never went to eat from their houses after that. I mean, he still kept relations with them, and they can come to his house, but he refused to go to their house because of that. They took money from the Khalifa. He went on, to teach and to write the Musnad, which is one of the greatest collections of hadith, subhanAllah, about 15 volumes. Imam Ahmad wrote that, collecting all the hadith. And he was asked later in life about his oppressors. Did you make dua against them? He said, وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَن يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ وَاللَّهُ غَفُورٌ رَحِيمٌ. He said, one should forgive and pardon. Do you not want that Allah, don't you love that Allah will forgive you? Verily Allah is the most forgiving, the most merciful. Reciting the ayah basically from the Quran. Imagine, if you went through all that, how would you feel? Um, Sadaqah to his ifk for Aisha. Yeah, I think it's. I don't know if it's that one or a different one. I'm not sure. I know what you're talking about. There's another story like another ayah basically that um you shouldn't. This one, I think so. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah. He became ill towards the end of his life, like very sick and have the fever, and in his deathbed, subhanallah, he was being told by his son to say La ilaha illallah, and he was saying not yet, not yet. And his son was very worried. The pious Imam is saying not yet in his deathbed. What's going on, basically? And then when he came to it, he said the shaitan was coming to him, saying that you've made it, you're going to Jannah. Khalas, like you're trying to trick him, basically. You're saying not yet, not yet. And then some was saying another narration that he was saying no, no, and it was saying the shaitan came to him and said that you were wrong about Islam. You should really become a Christian or a Jew or whatever. And he was saying no, no, no. And then afterwards he told his son what happened and he said the Shahada and he passed away on the Jummah in 241 after the Hijri. And he was about 77 years old. It says that 1.3 million people attended his janazah, subhanAllah. You can imagine at that time, imagine 1.3 million people, right? And they said that like 80,000 Christians and Jews became Muslim from that, subhanAllah. Ibn Jawzi, he wrote a book about Imam Ahmad, like his Fada'il, and like that was the book I was telling you about. It's like 700 pages, mentioning all the great attributes of Imam Ahmad. And he confirmed in it that he had over 400 teachers and scholars that he studied under. So Imam Ahmad, subhanAllah, was a very pious and knowledgeable scholar of Islam. And I just thought, before getting into the madhab, to like get an idea of his life and his background, what he went through to deliver this knowledge to us, inshallah. And then next week we'll talk about the actual formation of the madhab, like how it came about, if we have time, inshallah, and then get into the author of the book that we're going to go into, and then the book itself, inshallah. So all these are introductory because I'll be traveling in January. Like I said earlier, I don't want to start the actual text, the metin, before, because I don't want to get caught off in the middle of it. So I was doing these introductory classes, inshallah, and then when I get back, we'll start the fiqh aspect. Any comments or questions before? Yes. The first one was Al-Ma'mun, the Abbasid dynasty. Yeah. The original founder of the ideology was during the Umayyad period, and he was actually executed by the Umayyad Khalifa. He was said Ja'd ibn Darham, right? It was said that the Khalifa on Eid, he said, you guys have sacrificed your Eid, Dhahaya, and now I will sacrifice, this person, basically, we're saying, Allah, he had him executed because of this innovation that he was bringing to the Ummah, something like never heard before. This is the shaitan, how he tricks people. So initially, the true Khulafa hated this type of ideology, but subhanAllah, because this person was into philosophy and these things, he allowed them into his court. He started getting influenced by them, and that's why he started bringing out the spreading this evil. Yeah. All right, Jazakumullah khair. I will see you all either Friday or next Wednesday. What's that? I travel for about maybe like a month, 3 weeks to a month, yeah, depending. Before Ramadan, yeah. So if we're close to Ramadan, we might just do the chapter of fasting, maybe. It's up to you guys. When I get back, we'll ask, inshallah, if you want to start from the beginning or you want to jump to the Kitab al-Siyam. طيب سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Anyone? Oh, okay. That's you.